Like, I think if we just focus on people's strengths, we're missing the half of the story that makes us human.
Tell me more about that.
I do a lot of work in youth, and there's a lot of a focus with youth on talking about strengths, and with adults too, about talking about our strengths and like putting them forward. And when we do that, it's only half the picture. There's a lot of strength in the vulnerability that we have, and a lot of growth and compassion, kindness, connection in the vulnerability that we have. And in the context of other people, we can kind of see ourselves reflected back. And I think that's a useful and really important part of being a human.
Welcome to This Helps, where we sit down with the world's leading helpers to find out how they're helping and also what helps them. By the end of this episode, you'll have practical tools to improve your own mental health. I'm Marlon Morgan, founder and CEO of Wellness Together, an organization dedicated to improving the mental health of thousands of people every day. Join me and my insightful Gen Z co-host Hannah Ravage as we sit down for authentic and vulnerable conversations with people dedicated to helping others. What helps? Let's find out. Louise, it's so good to see you. Thank you for being here on the show.
I'm delighted to be here. Is your audio good now? Would you like me to sing just to make sure it's working?
Your audio has been perfect this whole time, and it's been at least 12 to 15 long minutes of Dr. Louise Hayes trying to sit here and deal with my particular audio settings, and I'm already going to ask for her help because I was not flexible in that at all, and I felt like everything needed to be just perfect in order to have a good podcast. But that's not true, is it, Dr. Hayes?
Not at all. In fact, I think the mistakes are often the best part of the podcast, but probably not if I sang to make sure your audio works, because that would make people just turn off.
I feel like when I watch something that someone else does, the mistakes are always the best because I feel close to the person doing it because I'm like, oh, wow, they're human too. But why is it that I can't feel that right now in the moment, like if I were to make a mistake?
I think you just answered your question. Why is that? Tell me. I can give you an answer, but it's much better if you answer. Why is that?
This is, I think I'm just nervous about it, right?
Yeah.
Am I going to have to think deeply about, like, I think I'm just going to take it to like an existential extreme immediately. And then people aren't going to think I'm a good podcaster, and then I'll be sad forever. Is that how that goes?
That's exactly how that goes. And you can, as I was watching you think about it, there was a pause where I was thinking, oh my goodness, I should have just answered the question for Marlon instead of asking him to answer his own question.
No, people want to see that. They want to see me have to answer that question that no one wants to answer.
That's right. But what we were both doing is the same thing. Is right. We are using our cognitive processes, our self-talk, and what we call giving ourselves advice to, like, don't make a mistake. Yours is your mind's going, don't make a mistake, don't mess up, because people will think you're not a good podcaster. We're right inside the problem that all of us humans have, is we feel like we need to be perfect, and we live in a world where everyone, Insta and TikTok and places like that make us feel like we need to be perfect. Although I think TikTok's kind of breaking that down a little bit. People make lots of goofy things on TikTok that maybe breaks it down. But I think social media has set us up to look like we're always on display.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure having to be perfect. And then it's so funny because no one cares. And like you said, they probably would like it better if we were just regular. But people, is that the only reason that we're so involved in social media? Is that because we want to see perfection, or are we just waiting for someone to mess up the whole time?
Well, I think both. We kind of love to see when people have these, are doing amazing things. Everyone looks like they're amazing on social media. And we kind of love to see that, someone is off to Greece or someone is having a party with lots of friends. And we kind of love to see that, but at the same time, it makes us feel less like my life is not as good. And I think all through this conversation, we're hearing the same theme, is we have these cognitive processes. I'm going to call it your advisor because that's what we call it, and you know that. And it's just a way of being able to see how we give ourselves advice about the world.
So my advisor, that's the A in DNAV. And for our listeners, I first became familiar with you and your work when I had to teach a class that was, at the graduate level, and it was advanced counseling. The three theoretical approaches that we used, or orientations that we used, were DBT, ACT, and CBT, which obviously there's some serious crossover there with the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. But my favorite was ACT, and I had an experience similar to the one you had where, who is this Stephen Hayes guy, and then I wanted to know more about it. But then immediately I started ordering books from Amazon, and you had written several of them. And so I started reading them, and they literally were changing my way of thinking and helping me. And I didn't actually think, this was years ago, I never thought I'd be talking to you about it on a podcast, because, it's kind of like meeting your heroes in some ways, because you've written a lot of the supporting, books and materials around acceptance and commitment therapy. But what I'm hoping that you can do is kind of can you take us backward from the DNAV model that you've sort of co-founded back into ACT?
Sure. Let's go back to ACT, but let's go back to the kind of discovering ACT for me, which I know your story is similar. I'm going to go a long way back. I grew up in a disadvantaged family. My father was an alcoholic. We had no money. We had smashed windows, and we lived off food donations from neighbours. My self-talk, my advice that I gave myself all the way through those early years was never that I would have a good life. And so I tried to compensate for that by working really hard and feeling like I always had to be perfect, like I could never make a mistake. Like I had to look perfect and be perfect and get A grades and do all that stuff. And then along came Steve Hayes and introduced ACT when I was in graduate school. And he talked about, having panic disorder, and he talked about hiding under his desk. And I'm like, here's a man with all these publications and all these books, and he's the first person I feel seen by.
Wow.
Because he's not pretending that he has his life perfect.
So there was some strength in that vulnerability that he was sharing.
Yeah. I discovered that my pretending that I had life all under control and that it was perfect was actually holding me back and really not helping me connect with people. And that completely changed my life. Like, it wasn't in an instant. It took me several years to kind of, pull away those layers and be able to be a human and make mistakes and mess up and get it wrong and keep going and keep growing.
It almost sounds like someone's story when they first started believing, first went to church or started, getting into a certain worldview. But this changed your whole way of thinking, it sounds like.
Well, it did. I stopped hiding. I realised in that moment, and then some ongoing training after that I didn't need to hide the things that had happened to me. I didn't need to pretend that I had a perfect childhood and that everything was okay in my life. That I could say, hey, I came from a disadvantaged family, and that people wouldn't see me as less.
So that was your worry. You thought if they found out the truth about you, they would have some kind of power over you to make things worse?
I guess I felt shame. So it wasn't so much that they would have power over me, although they would. It was more that I felt ashamed and that they would see me as trash.
And not recognize your value.
Mm. And when I think about it and say it now, it's probably more that I would not recognise my value as well, that I was ashamed and I didn't know how to deal with that shame.
It's almost like we're trying to avoid other people reflecting back to us what we're already scared is true.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And you felt freed up from that by hearing about Stephen Hayes and talking about ACT and how he got freedom from his anxiety.
Yeah, initially hearing it and then trying it, discovering step by step, like we're having this conversation about vulnerability. So discovering like little ways in which I began to talk about my own vulnerability, and what came back to me was people connecting with it and people recognising in my vulnerability as well as my strength, their own vulnerability as well as their strength. Like, I think if we just focus on people's strengths, we're missing the half of the story that makes us human.
Tell me more about that.
I do a lot of work in youth, and there's a lot of a focus with youth on talking about strengths, and with adults too, about talking about our strengths and like putting them forward. And when we do that, it's only half the picture. There's a lot of strength in the vulnerability that we have, and a lot of growth and compassion, kindness, connection in the vulnerability that we have. And in the context of other people, we can kind of see ourselves reflected back. And I think that's a useful and really important part of being a human.
Do we like people better when we see parts of ourselves in them?
Yes. We like people better when they've shared the same journey. That's what makes a good podcast, right?
Yeah.
Someone who messes up, someone who's shared the same journey. We like to know that we're on the same path.
Not alone. We're not alone in this. That makes everything better, I think, is when we're experiencing things and we can connect about those things versus just sort of experiencing them in a void or a vacuum. That's lonely and painful.
Yeah, absolutely. And where we have our strengths and we put them to the front, but we also have our vulnerabilities and we talk about them, acknowledge them, see them, and learn together from them.
My guard is so far down because of how your therapy voice. I knew about it and I tried to remember it, but I'm absolutely powerless against it right now. I feel like I'm not even going to ask any questions. That I just want you to keep talking if you don't mind.
Well, I've got to be careful. A therapy voice is probably not great for a podcast.
I don't know. I think people are going to love it. I think they're going to say it was so calming and I just felt better no matter what she said. And your accent, we should talk about that because you are across the world from us right now. I don't even know if it's the same day. Where are you coming to us from?
It's not the same day. I'm in the future.
Oh my.
I'm in the future, and I am coming to you from a little tiny town in Australia, obviously.
Yeah.
If people haven't worked out, my accent is Australian.
Yeah.
I am in a little tiny town halfway between Melbourne and Sydney, which people probably know Melbourne and Sydney.
Yeah.
So it's in a little place halfway between those two. And when I say little, there's 2,000 people.
Oh, that is little.
That's really little.
What do people want to talk to you about when they hear your accent? What's the first things they say and ask you? What I mean by people, talk about ethnocentric. What do Americans want to know about when they see you and hear you?
Well, they often like the colloquialisms that I use.
Uh-huh.
And I don't even realise they are until I'm talking and I'll say, far out or something, and they just start laughing, and then so I often don't really know, but it's just when I use a phrase that is not part of the American language or part of the American way of speaking, and they just start laughing and say, "Could you say that again?"
They just love it.
They just like it, but they don't ask me what you think, like kangaroos or anything. They don't ask about that stuff.
Gosh, they don't want to be tacky. I do this a lot, and that is bring up house hunters because I feel like I'm traveling the world and you get like a pretty good view. There's always some like fake drama with the couple on House Hunters, and he wants a pool and she wants 2 stories. It's like the weirdest, most fake drama, but I'm so into it. But I would say like half the episodes lately are in Australia, and I saw an animal that I thought was a koala just a week ago. It was not a koala or a kangaroo. It was a wombat.
Oh, a wombat, of course.
Do you see wombats around? I couldn't tell if it was kind of cute, but then it was kind of scary.
Well, do you know, I live in the countryside and I have wombats just around the corner from me. And I could walk a quarter of a mile and there would be hundreds of kangaroos. So I can fit the stereotype. There's wombats and kangaroos just around the corner.
Okay. We took a little break because I had to obsess over some more settings here, but we're back. And during the break, I feel like Louise saved the best / most terrifying fact about wombats for last. And that is they're like one of the fastest land animals.
Yeah, very fast.
And when you walk outside and you see one, does it strike fear into your heart, or do you think it's cute?
I think they're cute. And you don't see them unless you're wandering around at night time.
Okay, but you see the evidence because the last fact, and I think we buried the lead here, is they're cube poopers, for lack of a better word.
They poo squares.
Okay, they poo squares. You've heard it here first from renowned psychologist, Dr. Louise Hayes. Wombats poo squares. Now, I want to get back to our journey on acceptance and commitment therapy. You had just gone through grad school. You discovered acceptance and commitment therapy. You were inspired by Dr. Stephen Hayes, which no relation actually, right? Because you have the same last name, but you're not related. That always threw me off.
Yeah, people often think I'm his ex-wife who's been sent to Australia.
Banished to be with the wombats.
And in fact, when I was going through a divorce, I was running a workshop, and I talked in the workshop about my ex-husband, and someone came up to me in the break and said, "Are you talking about Steve Hayes?"
Oh my gosh, that would have been a good story. Did you just say yes and then see what happens?
Well, I'm not that wicked. I said no.
Yeah. Back us up to right after becoming inspired. You started getting more info about ACT. And then what? Where were you in grad school?
I was in Melbourne, Australia, and I went to a training and saw Steve. And
he came to Australia?
Yeah, he was down in Melbourne, and it was life-changing. I threw out everything and just started doing this.
What were you working on before that?
Before that, I was using behaviour therapy and cognitive behaviour therapy, and trying my best to be perfect at everything.
That is a little bit of, I've been talking to a lot of the younger people we work with. We have a lot of therapists who work with students, high school, junior high, and some of the reactions from today's students, I'll say Gen Z and Gen Alpha, when they hear about CBT, I heard one student say it felt like they were gaslighting themselves. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such an interesting comment.
Yeah, it was very insightful.
I wouldn't have even known what gaslighting was when I was in graduate school.
Oh, they know what everything is. They know what everything is. That they probably know everything we know, and then whatever weird stuff they've made up since then.
Yeah, but I can get that comment. When I was I think there's a really important thing inside doing counselling or therapy, and that is we need to do it on ourselves.
Mm.
And if you are handing a thought diary to to a young person and saying, write down your thoughts in this order and do that every day. If you're doing that and you won't do it yourself, there's a problem.
Oh, it's so much easier to ask someone else to do it. That's typical homework in cognitive behavior therapy, right?
Yeah, typical homework is to get someone to write something down. And I tried it when I was learning some of these things, and 2 lines and then the piece of paper is forgotten.
Mhm.
So there's a really important thing inside ACT that I think is really useful. We have to be able to do it on ourselves.
What does that look like?
Well, it looks like how we started this podcast, where, we were talking about things going wrong and being able to be aware of your cognitive processes. We'll call it your advisor, being aware of the way your advisor is giving you advice, being able to be aware of what's going on in your body, and being able to allow that instead of controlling it and pushing it away.
So ACT, I feel like, is sort of an evolution of CBT, where it takes some of the things that we do, sort of listening to ourselves and then trying to change it, and takes out that part where every time you think a negative thought, a person like me, when I had an automatic negative thought, I would get down on myself for that. And I would get lost in sort of a spiral. I wouldn't just immediately replace it like a robot. I would think, oh, this is, I'm such a negative person. I shouldn't be thinking this. And then everything was sort of forgotten. And of course, I didn't want to see that piece of paper again. It was just evidence of me not thinking the right thing.
Yeah, it's just more evidence of how bad you are at getting your thinking right.
But with ACT, I felt like I could start to relate my place in the world, the meaning I have in life, things that I like, my actual values in life, closer to my processes. And then I was able to think sort of not what I was avoiding, but what I wanted to be more like, and how I wanted to build in a direction that would actually be helpful. And I shouldn't even say right. I think, and this was actually something I learned from CBT, and that is, there's no use for right and wrong when it comes to therapy. There's only helpful and unhelpful.
And that's not a bad thing to think about. There is only helpful and unhelpful. But we're not good at looking at helpful and unhelpful.
Tell me about that.
In ACT, we talk about helpful and unhelpful in a specific way. Helpful are things that are connected to what you care about, what you value, how you want to be in the world. And unhelpful are things that don't help you do that. So there's no so let's give a good example. Let's imagine that you're a kid in high school and you have a thought like, I suck at math.
Mm-hmm. That's real. That's a real thought I had.
That's a real thought. So if you have that thought, I suck at math, and you care about studying math, that you want to pass math, and that thought helps you study harder, then that's actually helpful. But if you have a thought, I suck at math, and then you put your books away and you go and watch Netflix or doom scroll, then that's not helpful. So this can sometimes be a little hard to catch in our own lives, but helpful or unhelpful is the product of what it does. And if it helps you continue to really have a life where you care about those things and where it makes your life meaningful to you, then it can be very helpful to even have critical thoughts.
So the behavior is measured in terms of, does it bring me closer to what I actually care about in life? How does that affect our mood?
Well, I think everything we do affects our mood. There's this piece that we've kind of not really talked about so far in our framework of DNAV. There's a piece that we call the noticer.
Let's go through the DNAV. Can you take us through the acronym, and then we can just sort of go through it all?
Sure. I notice I've got reactions on and I don't know how to make them stop.
That's a Zoom reaction, so I think that's in your Zoom settings.
I don't know how to do it. I tried to do it and I can't get it to turn off.
Let me see.
Oh, hang on. I did it. I just did it. I fixed it. See, now, that's a great example of discovery, right? So let's go through the DNAV model.
Yeah, let's do it.
So discovery, or being a discoverer. So let me back up a bit. You have, as a human, 4 abilities. Every human has 4 abilities, and we classify them into easy to remember names. You can call them anything you want. So Discoverer is the ability to use your experience to learn through trial and error. So I said, I don't know how to change the reactions. And you said, I do, which kind of prompted me to go, all right, I'll press a few buttons and see what happened. So trial and error is the discoverer, trying things and seeing what happens. Sometimes it works and I turned the reactions off, or I could have fumbled with the buttons for 5 minutes and failed. That would have been okay too. That's discovery. In my head, I think of like a toddler learning to walk. They stand up and they fall down and they stand up and they fall down. That's it. It's a very powerful human ability. So noticing is the ability to be aware of the world around us and inside our body. And you were a noticer from the minute you were born. Everybody was. It's a really powerful ability that we have. From the minute we were born, and probably before that, we sensed the world through our bodies, through our senses, and that's where mood and emotions lie. And then there's the A stands for advisor, which is the piece we often give a priority to, but that's a cultural thing. And it's just the way we use our thoughts and our cognitions to navigate our life. So that's our experience through the discoverer, trying and failing, standing up and falling down, our embodied senses and presence in the world, the noticer, and the advisor, our cognitions. That's DNA. And the V is what's in your heart. To be cheesy, it's an easy way to remember it. It's what's in your heart, what really matters. And so what we want to do is we help young people and adults learn how to use these abilities in ways that give them more life and not less.
What do you mean by more life and not less?
Well, being able to direct your abilities towards things you care about, being able to not get stuck in whether, let's use our current example. You could go home from this podcast and really obsess over the blurred background that bothered you. Mm-hmm. And how useful would that be? Or you could go home and think about what we talked about and how the podcast might be useful for the next thing you want to do. That's more life.
That makes sense.
It's really helping people grow and build and get more of what they want. And I don't know that many of us would say more of what we want is to think for the next 4 hours about whether I could find the reaction button or whether you had a blurred background, right?
Well, I think what I really wanted was just to distract myself from any kind of other feelings that might come in, because at least I'd be in control of the anxious ones and I knew what the problem was.
Yeah, that's why noticing matters so much. When we were infants, we could have our feelings without any problem. We could be angry, we could be upset, we could cry, we could be uncomfortable, and we didn't control it. It just was there. Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the way, our cultures teach us to shut that off and to not feel, because it's scary.
You mentioned our advisors, like sort of a cultural phenomena, or maybe is differs from culture to culture. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, there is a commonality across cultures, but I'm going to generalise, of course, but in Western cultures, there is a tendency to think that like this rational problem-solving part of us is the best part of us.
Most useful?
The most useful, the easiest way to avoid threat, the easiest way to control our lives. And yet, if you think about when we started the podcast, the thing that we resonate with is that vulnerability part, which is inside the noticer, is being able to think about what's going on inside your body and what those messages are and use them.
Yeah.
I think that's a really much more powerful experience when you're with other people.
Noticing versus advising / controlling.
Yeah, yeah.
That sounds like a better life already.
Well, it is, but there's a little catch in there, is that when we spend more time noticing what's going on inside us and what's going on around us, we can feel strong feelings like anxiety or fear or sadness. And if we don't know how to have that, then we can quickly kind of push it away, shut it down, use our cognitions to override it, and we lose something really important. We lose, firstly, our ability to be present in the world, and we lose our ability to connect with other people.
So it sounds like we think we're keeping ourselves safe, but really we're just keeping ourselves lonely?
Yeah, isolated, separated from people. Let me say it in a little bit of a different kind of way, and maybe the listeners can think about it like this. If they think about the people that they love to be around, you think about the people that people's presence who you really like to be in, where you really enjoy their company, and it's just great to hang around these people, the ones you really want to invite over to the party. Are they the ones who are perfect, who never make a mistake, who look like they're all together all of the time? Maybe there might be one or two of those, but for most of us, it'll be the ones that we can be ourselves with. That we can talk about the things we're good at, our strengths, but we can also mess up and have a laugh and not worry too much. So I think that's what I mean by separates us in our effort to not feel and to be anxious about what's going on in our bodies. We're sometimes so caught up inside our bodies that we're not connecting with other people.
So by noticing more and advising less, we can have a more full experience in a room with other people.
I would say not advising less, but by advising, being aware of our advice. I think awareness is the key.
So even noticing your advisor, that's part of it.
Yeah, being aware of it. Because, sometimes we spend so much time inside this superpower of thinking and problem solving that we don't even see it. We don't even know. We're not even aware that we're constantly monitoring the world and making decisions about what's going on. So I think awareness rather than less, because awareness gives you that capacity to, let's say at a party, awareness gives you that capacity to think, right now I'm just lost in my thoughts about what I said 5 minutes ago. Let me just put that down and look at your face and talk to you. I wonder what Marlon has to say.
So nobody wants to hang out with someone who's secretly rehashing every word that they're saying? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I wouldn't say nobody, but I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, that would be freeing, just to sit and notice and experience. And then where do the values? Because you're sort of discovering that whole time. And then where do the values come in?
Well, the values are in the centre. When we look at DNAV, we have it in a circle shape, with D, N, and A on the outside and V in the middle, because it's a nice way to think about it as being like your centre. The values come in where you make a choice. So you're at the party, you're noticing some anxiety in your body because you're not a party goer or you're nervous at parties. Your advisor is saying, make sure you don't say something stupid. And you could discover I might be quiet because you're not actually doing anything or stepping into anything. But the values piece allows you to think and to consider, what is the most important thing here at this party? What do I really care about? And maybe it's showing up. Maybe it's listening. Maybe it's talking, but being able to think about what would be the most important thing for me here. And I use parties a lot in examples because I always talk to my young clients about how I hate going anywhere, especially parties, right? But
Yeah.
I never want to go anywhere. Before anything, I'm always grumbling around the house like, why do I have to go to this? I don't want to go to this. It's going to be terrible. I never want to go. And then I go because I care about it and I value something in it. Like maybe I said I'd go. And I care about the people who are running the event. And I said, oh, yeah, I'll go. So I go because I put my values first, what really matters to me and to the people who are running the event. And then inevitably, I will have a good time.
I think all of us can relate to that. I often feel like that, or I'm tired, or I don't want to go do something, or I just want to sit after working and sit by myself or do something that like is probably unhelpful, watch a screen. But is that our advisor saying, hey, you should just relax. You owe it to yourself. Just stay safe, relax. And then our advisor saying, hey, just avoid the anxiety. But then what happens?
That's exactly right. So noticing tension in the body because you have to go out. You have to go to this social event. So your advisor's always there to help you, right? So you'll hear this little voice come inside you, which is you, of course, saying, hey, just stay up. Just send a text message. Say you can't really make it. Make up an excuse. You're not feeling well. Stay home, right?
Yeah.
Because your advisor is there always to try to protect you.
Dr. Stephen Hayes says you can say, well, thank you. Thank you for trying to protect me. But then what?
Then what? Then step into the values piece and think, what's really important here? And often, let's say with a party, it'll be that someone has invited you or that someone cares about you being there and that you said you would go. There's an integrity thing in there. So that's when we have all this awareness going on, and this happens very quickly. And then I like to talk to young people and adults about using this discovery piece. Let's just use the experience of going and seeing what the experience teaches us.
You really took the pressure out. I feel like you took a bunch of pressure off by saying that.
Yeah, just use the experience and see what the experience teaches you. And over the years, I have learned that my experience will almost always teach me that it was okay, that going to the party was okay. And I will also know that every single event I ever have to go to, I'm still going to have to do this little dance of, I don't want to go. Why do I have to go? Why can't I just stay home in my sweatpants?
Let's take this to a different analogy. And you and I both worked with young people. I don't have a private practice anymore, but it sounds like you still do.
I do, yeah.
And if a young person comes to you and says, or even an old person comes to you and says, I know I'm on my phone a lot. I recognize that the longer I spend on my phone without breaks alone, the worse I feel. But there's still a little voice inside me. I'm guessing it's the advisor that says, hey, just pick up your phone and start scrolling.
Yeah. Firstly, if a young person says to me that they do that, the first place we're always going to look is, how does that work for you? How does it work for you in your life?
What would they say to that?
Well, they usually say it makes me feel good or it's okay. But here's the deal. The fact that you're telling me about it right now probably means that it's not really working, right? That you want something different.
It's not in line with my values.
Yeah, you want something different. Because if you didn't want something different, you wouldn't be telling me right now. You wouldn't be recognising. So there's a piece in there of firstly acknowledging that you see this as a problem.
Sure. Yeah. But everyone does it. Are you okay doing a little role play with me being sort of like a person that doesn't have a lot of insight because I'm younger and people want me to be a consumer and they want to use my attention to make themselves richer? You okay with that?
Sure. You be a young person. You be a young person who's stuck.
Okay. I'm stuck. And I know that there's probably more to life than looking at my screen, but it's when I feel the most connected to other people and the times when I have tried to connect with other people, they either pull their phone out or they try to show me a video or we never seem to have a real deep conversation.
Well, the first thing I think is really important here is that this is not just you. You've already told me about your other friends pulling out phones.
But they love it. They seem to be fine. I see them. I see the pictures they take, and they're always having a great time.
What does it feel like when you're in that moment and you're trying to connect with someone? What do you notice?
I just feel different than everyone else because they seem to be fine with what is happening, and I'm sort of just not. Makes me feel anxious.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to help you see the parts of you that are at play here. And so the first part is you were giving yourself some kind of feedback. You were giving yourself some self-talk, like they seem fine and I'm not. We call that giving yourself advice, all right? And it's a cool part of being a human. They seem fine and I'm not. So when you do that, you're kind of protecting yourself.
Seems like I'm hurting myself because I'm just comparing and I end up feeling sad.
But you're also protecting yourself because something else happens is maybe you pull away and go back to your phone. Right.
Yeah, because I don't want them to think I'm different.
Right. Okay. So we're going to talk about this a little bit, this ability to protect yourself so that you don't take a risk and step into a social situation in which you might make a mistake. We're going to call that giving yourself advice. Don't make a mistake, Marlon, whatever you do. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a primary job of the way we think and feel is to protect ourselves. Now, do you want to be protected by not socialising and being on your phone? Is that the kind of protection you want to use your abilities for?
I just feel like I don't have a choice. I don't know how to do the other version. I don't even know what it looks like.
Okay. Well, you know what? I actually like that you don't know what it looks like, or that you say you don't know what it looks like, because that gives us a good place to step into what we call discovery. It's being able to experience it and being able to try something that maybe you've not tried before. So if you and I were together right now, what we could do is get out our phones. We could dive deep into our phones, and let's imagine that we just did that and now we're going to put them away. And so here's you and me connecting. What does it look like?
That's scary because I could say something and I have no idea how I look to you right now. I can't see myself. But you have to like me. My parents pay for my sessions. You have to say nice things to me.
Well, there's your advisor giving you all this advice that I have to like you. But what is it like just to talk to someone? Like just to talk to me?
Well, I like
No
talking
phone.
to you because you're nice.
Okay.
And you don't take out your phone.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So here's a little thing. We're going to do a little experiment. We're going to do a little discovery experiment. Tomorrow, when you go to school, we're going to think about one little thing, one little discovery experiment that you could do that would be not being on your phone, but would be maybe connecting with someone in a way that you've not done before.
Like
Can
what?
you think of something you might do?
Not really.
Well, I can think of it for you, but I'd rather you think of it.
Well, let's see. Like I just have to say hi to somebody in class, or
Yeah, let's try that. Just say hi to someone in class.
are they going to think I'm weird though?
Well, there's your advisor again. Maybe.
All right.
Maybe. We can't control what other people think, but what you have control over is what you do. So I want you to do a little experiment. This next little while, just go and say hi to a couple of people and see what happens. Just say hi. See what happens. I know what will happen. Your advisor will say, oh, they think you're weird. Why did you do that? But that's not the see what happens I want you to do. I want you to just watch what they do and see what the experience of saying hi teaches you.
Okay, I'll try it.
Now, what I can guarantee is this. Sometimes it'll go well and sometimes it won't. Sometimes you'll say hi and someone will ignore you. But the experience of it is how you are learning, not what they do, how you are learning. And I want you to particularly notice how you feel about yourself when you try this harder thing. In fact, let's do it a different way. Let's just leave my clinic now and we'll go down the street and try it.
You're going to go with me?
I'll go with you. We'll go down the street and we'll try it. I won't stand next to you because that will look weird. People will wonder why you've got this old woman standing next to you. But we'll just go into a couple of shops or walk down the street and say hi. You tell me what happens.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Yeah, thank you.
Let's try it.
That's great. I feel like that's what people need to hear, because that is ACT and DNAV in a process. You're giving people small but doable steps to have that feeling of self-efficacy, to feel better about it and know that it's even possible, that the world's not going to be over if someone gives them a dirty look or doesn't say hi. So you're kind of testing out that's discovery, right?
Yeah, there's power in our experience. And we have to help people know that, especially like that example with kids, there's every chance a kid will go to school and say hi and someone will just look at them and not answer. So we have to allow them to recognise that this is not about how it works out for them. It's about how they feel about trying these next things. And being able to actually do it is the best thing, not talk about it. So get out of your clinic or get out of your counselling room, walked down the corridor or across the schoolyard and have people do it. Not next to them, but, kind of hovering around in the background.
Yeah, lurking around and waiting for them to say hi to people.
I want to point out, if I can, just point out something really important in here. The listeners might think, well, that's just saying hi. That's not helping a kid get off their phone. This is a small thing. But what we know and what I've discovered over the years, there's something really powerful when you help someone take a little tiny step that they don't think they could do. And you can see it. Let's use this example. I'll help a young person say hi, and then they'll come in 2 weeks later or 2 sessions later and tell me that they're going to a party. And so in our minds, we tend to think we have to focus on the big thing. We have to help this kid who's on their phone get off their phone, become social, go to parties. We have to focus on the really big picture of changing their life dramatically. But our life changes when we take a small step and we discover that we are more capable than what we think we are.
Yeah, it feels like you have to be good at something right away, especially now. I think all we really see around us are people who are really good at things, and people want to see that.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that I can share this example, and I'm sure it's okay. I was talking yesterday to a therapist who was working with a young person, a young autistic person. And this young autistic person began the sessions in therapy completely shut down, crying, unable to talk. And yesterday, this therapist that I was doing supervision with said to me, she said, "We read some books on autism. We read them together. And I cannot believe that this young person has completely changed their life. They now come in, they're talking about work, they're talking about socialising, they look at me and talk to me." And she said, all we did was read books, a couple of books together.
In session, or sort of following along?
In session together, like reading a story together.
Interesting.
And I think it's a wonderful example of how a small step leads to a big step.
Well, also not doing it alone, because I feel like if I had someone diagnose me with something and then send me home to find out about what that is by myself, seems like the worst case scenario. But if they said, oh, let's learn about it together, it's almost like holding your hand across the street.
Exactly. And so I think as helpers, we also have to get out of our own way and kind of recognise that the small things actually really matter a lot, because it's the steps that we take.
Small steps in the same direction.
Yeah. When you discover you can do a little thing, then there's another little thing that comes along. But you've also alluded to one thing that's really important inside this DNAV framework, and that's that it sits in the context. There's a ring, if you looked at the disc, there's a ring around it of the social world and the world of the self. And I think whenever we work with ourselves or with young people, and you see it in our conversation, everything ends up about other people. Everything ends up about the social world. A kid asking about how to make friends or how to get off their phone so they can socialise more. I don't know about you, but I rarely have someone who comes to me and says, I'm really loved and I feel really well connected and I feel like I've really got great friends, but I thought I'd come and get therapy. It just doesn't happen. Everything that goes on with us is connected with other people. It's what other people think. It's what other people feel. It's the judgments that they make towards us. We're just constantly in this dialogue about other people. And yet we tend to do counselling just about that individual. And I think we need to change that a lot. I think we need to spend a lot more time thinking about the social world and the way my thoughts and my feelings and my experiences and my values are connected and are influenced by the people I love and care about.
So in a way, it does have something to do with other people and their thoughts and feelings towards us, but not in the way that we are thinking.
Yes, not always in the way that we're thinking, because we can be critical and judgmental. Like, I already know that when I get off this podcast, I'll be thinking, oh, did I do a good job? Did I talk too much? That's going to go on.
There's no sense in both of us doing that, unless you want to call me afterwards and we can do it together.
Yeah, what a great social intervention. Let's call each other and we'll complain to each other about the things we did wrong.
Yeah, I'm going to make a list of second guesses I have from everything I said. And if you don't mind, we'll just get back together and that'll be another podcast.
That will probably be a better podcast.
The thing that's so funny about that is it does make you, trying to be safe does make you so selfish, like when we're trying to avoid pain, and pain itself I feel selfish when I'm in pain. Like if I stub my toe, that's all I'm thinking about is me. And so I think it helps to have someone to talk to who can help open back up our worldview to include everyone else and how much we need them and how it's going to feel when we invest in those relationships, because otherwise all we know about is pain and how to avoid it. And I've talked to Dr. Anna Lemke about this, who wrote Dopamine Nation, and she talks about how we're so miserable, and the main reason as a culture, in America anyway, that we are feeling so miserable, and she really does include most of the Western world, is because we're trying so hard to escape this pain that we're actually making ourselves miserable. And that is actually why I reached out to her in the first place, because that's ACT.
It is. The default mode network, which is the part of our brain that is active when we're doing nothing. So when we're just sitting on the sofa doing nothing, our default mode network comes in. Well, in that place, we're usually the default mode network is usually reflecting on ourselves, just thinking about ourselves.
Yeah.
And, just thinking about ourselves over and over, what we did, what we might do, what's going to happen in the future. Default mode network is just thinking about ourselves.
Yeah.
There's a really cool little experience I often give my clients, and you can disrupt that by going outside and just looking at the sky for 20, 30 seconds. Just go and look as far away into the future as you can. As far away in the distance as you can, not the future. And just look at the sky. And what you're doing is you're kind of flipping your brain over from just reflecting, self-reflecting, to seeing the world and being out in the world.
What is that doing in terms of DNAV?
Well, I think it's noticing. I think it's getting out of in terms of DNAV, and we can use those abilities words, it's getting out of your thinking advisor, giving yourself advice about whether you've done a good job or bad job, what's wrong with you, what's going to happen in the future, that dialogue, to using your noticer to be in the world.
I heard once that even when people are doing things they don't really like doing, they're still happier when they're fully engaged. If it's changing a diaper or they're in traffic, as long as they're fully engaged in that activity, actually they're happier than if they were distracted or sort of trying to distract themselves that whole time.
Yeah. To be in the world. And there's something about our modern culture that really switches on this reflective piece of judging ourselves, I think. I'm going to go away from the research here and just tell you a little fun fact that I tell my clients.
Please.
So my husband is from the Himalaya. He grew up in a very remote village in the Himalaya. And I tell my clients this sometimes because I tell young people, he did not see himself in a mirror until he was 17.
My gosh.
And so sometimes I say to young people, there are people who never know what they look like.
Wow.
And then the only way you know what you look like is by watching the faces of the people that you talk to. Think about that. It's worth considering.
I think it's what we're missing from so much of our real, the synchronous real-time feedback for us as a species is limited at best.
Mm. Because then how I know me is by how you look at me.
Have we traded that in, Louise? Have we traded in the meaningful response of people and the way they look at us for little digital symbols and likes
And selfies.
and selfies?
And that just ramps up our advisor to being judgmental about whether we look too fat or too old or whatever.
Well, an advisor needs data, right, to advise. So it's probably always looking for that data.
Yeah, yeah. And we always find ourselves wanting if we're just looking at the photo, the selfie.
Wow. How do your clients react when they hear that? What kinds of things are they saying?
Well, they kind of do exactly what you do. It's like a head spin when you think, wow, imagine growing up without knowing what you look like. And sometimes people will say, how do you do that? How do you not know what you look like? Well, for all of evolution, we didn't know what we looked like. And when you see an infant, and I know when you look at an infant, they're most concerned about looking in your eyes. From the minute we're born, we find faces and we follow faces. And we are all the same. We learn by watching other people. And we need those eyes.
So we're looking for faces, but most of the faces we're seeing are not directly reacting to us. They're not necessarily seeing us and our value at the same time, but we're still seeing faces. Is that playing with our mind and tricking us into thinking that we're getting what we need, but we're not?
I think so. Now, I'm just talking anecdotally here. I've seen a little bit of research, but not enough to quote it. We know that young children need real people, not the screen. They learn from real faces. I can only speak anecdotally, the difference between a virtual person.
Yeah, but this is an educated guess, though, because you're very educated. So I don't think anyone's holding you to this. I know you have academia and people listening that are like, show me the studies, Louise. But you know what? They're not listening anyway. So I just want to know what you think because your educated guess, I think, is pretty valuable in this situation.
Well, okay. We will go by experience, and we'll use your experience as well as mine.
Okay.
So we've just conducted a big social experiment all across the world. We moved when COVID happened. We moved away from being live with people to being virtual with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I did lots of virtual therapy. And then I would go and meet my client in real life after virtual therapy and just sit with them and say, wow, you are so much better in real life.
Yeah. It's making me happy just to think about it. The last time I saw you in real life, you gave me a huge hug. You had just come off the stage at a conference. And that's part of why I wanted to talk to you again, because I felt closer to you because we had met in real life.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, virtual is great and it serves a purpose. But real life people, there's so many more messages that are going on between you with real life people that you talk less, you use less words. There's gestures and the physical presence that creates an interaction.
You can sort of just kind of feel the person's interest in some ways. I don't want to quantify it too much. I'm not even sure if it can be, but I really do feel like I can value the person around me in proximity, close by, and I can feel valued by them so much easier and more than without all these, mediary, the computer or the screen or the microphone or all of that. I mean, it just feels so much different.
Yeah, I think that's the noticer piece, our ability to be physically present with someone and feel connected to them without actually doing anything.
We've focused a little bit on cell phones and screens because I think it is what is changing our mental health as a society and as a species, again, faster than anything else. And Australia, just in the last few days, passed a historic piece of legislation. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. And my understanding is they have banned social media for kids under the age of 16.
They have.
What's that like there? What are people saying?
Well, the circles that I'm moving in, are relieved. I don't know what some young people are saying. So, there's the generation of 14-year-olds who are probably saying different things. But the people that I'm talking to, and especially parents, are relieved because now they have like some concrete rule.
But what if they don't follow it? Are the parents going to follow it, you think? Because that's going to be weird if they're just like scrolling their face off next to their 14-year-old who they're like, no, you can't do this.
Yeah, well, that's going to be a challenge. And I think parents are going to be in this, adults, not parents, but adults are going to be in the same difficult place of having to think about how they use their phones. And it's a challenge for all of us. I've just spent 6 weeks detoxing. I was in Nepal, so I didn't use my phone for 6 weeks. Let me tell you, it's incredible.
We were going to do this interview before, and you responded with possibly the coolest thing a person could say. And it was a reason that you couldn't get together. You said, no, I'm headed to the Himalayas. I'm going to Nepal. So maybe I can talk to you when we get back. So I've wanted to bring that back up with you. So this is a perfect time. What were you doing there? Why? What the heck?
Well, this is the best part of my life. This is the best part of my life, and I count myself as very fortunate. 10 years ago, I was in that big earthquake in Nepal. I don't know if people remember, but in 2015, there was a big earthquake in Nepal, and I was in Kathmandu. And this is a values piece. My husband is from Nepal, and we just looked at each other and said, well, we need to do something to help people. What can we do? And so I said, well, I've got a network of health professionals. Let's bring health professionals to Nepal, and we'll take them to the Himalaya, and we'll give them a reflective trip where they get to reflect on their own lives, and we'll donate all the money to help kids. And 10 years later, we're still doing the same thing. We have a charity in Nepal, and we help kids. We donate all the money, and I donate my time, and we take health professionals and change their lives as well.
Talk about a value-guided life, Louise. That's incredible.
It's a joy to me. Sometimes people say to me, well, why don't you take a salary when you do that? But if I take a salary, it's not the same. Right?
You've got to explain that to our American audience. What?
Well, if I take a salary, then my advisor is going to start ramping up how all of the things that I have to do to justify this. And
but it's a win-win though, too, right? If we help people, we can help ourselves and make money, and right? That's capitalism's the answer. No.
Well, it's not for me. Not in this one. It's not for me. I've thought about it a lot, and we've been doing it for 10 years. And it's pretty hard. It's really hard. It's hard, but it's incredible. So this morning I got a package from someone who had come with us, a health professional, and she wrote me a little card with a gift that said, you have changed my life. I cannot believe how more compassionate I am, how softer I am, how more connected I am to the people around me. And I never expected that to happen.
That's incredible. What is it? What's the organization called, Louise? People are going to want to know about this.
Okay, they need to just go to my website, louisehayes.com.au, and click on the Mindful Adventures tab.
Okay.
Mindful Adventures is what we run. And so we donate the money. And here's the cool part, right? There's a little village in remote Nepal where we have just built a toilet block for a school that didn't have toilets. So the school had no toilets. Little kids were having to go in the local farmer's paddock to do their business. And the local farmer was not happy with that being on his vegetables.
Oh, I'm sure.
And female teachers were having to go home. And so now they've got a toilet. So that might not sound very important, but hey, schools without toilets.
It sounds like the most important. Having worked in schools, that seems like the most important thing to have.
Yeah.
Wow. That must feel amazing too, to be able to help the community that you're visiting.
It is. And, everybody, I think the message is everybody has things that light up their life. And the only way you're going to find them, if you don't have them, is to step into this place of discovery and try something that you think is too hard or is beyond you, or there's just a little hint of maybe this will be cool. So I'm socially anxious. For me to take health professionals to Nepal and run trips was terrifying. But there was a huge value that I wanted to help the recovery.
So you let your values guide yourself and sort of overtake the advisor.
Yeah.
To create something and for other people that's life-changing.
Yeah. And I would never have done that had it not been for what I really valued, which my values were big enough to think, all right, I can be nervous and do this. I'll just try it and see what happens.
What does a society look like, Louise, when our top values become fame and money?
Well, I think it looks like what we've got in lots of ways.
What are some other ones we can try them on and see if they could be helpful?
The other ones that we try on that we see, it's really easy. It's what you and I are doing right now, is connecting. I feel really connected to you.
Same.
Yeah, it's connecting. And it's being able to talk about what we hope and dream of. In one of our books, I wrote this little exercise, which I still really love. It's asking a young person what they dream of, and saying it in a way that I want you to tell me. Let's just think about what you dream of, but I'm not going to tell you to set goals, or it doesn't have to be realistic. You can tell me that you dream of being a rock star, but just let's find a way to dream, and to really explore some of the things that you would try. And when you do that thinking piece, you're stepping into the first place of just allowing yourself to get out of your advisor and its pragmatic, rational, you can't do that, and just dream, not shut ourselves down.
It's kind of nice to be able to do that with someone else, I think.
It is.
I think it's hard to do, or not as rewarding, if it's by yourself and you're not really sharing it with someone. Because I think having a dream, the coolest part of it, having it like just an actual dream, is being able to share it the next day and be like, can you believe this? But like to think up a dream that's in line with your values and then share that's so vulnerable, but so rewarding.
And to do it in a way where there's no judgment that you're going to go out and do this tomorrow. Right, that's the first behavioural step, is just to allow yourself to think about it. And the saddest part is many of us don't think about, we do not let ourselves dream of something different, because someone will know that we won't do it, and then we'll feel a failure. Do you know who that someone is? Your advisor. But think about this. We get so captured that we don't even dream of possibilities in case we don't do it, and then we know, and then we feel like a failure to ourselves. And your advisor says, see, you knew you'd never do that.
So we're scared of an I told you so from ourselves?
Yes.
Wow, we have a lot more control than we think we do then. Because we could always just say something different, like, you tried that, and congratulations to you for being so courageous, even if you don't succeed.
If we help people understand the way our thoughts really work, we can get out of that trap.
This is reminding me of some of the things that I've wanted to talk to you about over the years. You co-wrote a book with someone who we've worked with, a wonderful person, Dr. Joseph Cherokee. And one of the things that I liked so much about it was having learned as an adult acceptance and commitment therapy and how it works, and about sort of the hexaflex model and all of the things that go into it, the psychological flexibility that we want out of it. I struggled, and this is no offense to the genius that is Dr. Stephen Hayes, but I struggled to fit that into something helpful for young people. And you have created I don't know if it's a simplified or streamlined version, but I know it's one that can be communicated more quickly. So am I doing it a disservice by calling it streamlined by the DNAV?
Streamlined is good. Streamlined is fine. It's simple, but very deep.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it is. I would say it goes as deep as you can as a person, because, speaking as a couple of, nerds that love psychology, I can see Abraham Maslow in DNAV. I can see even just shades of the ego and the superego in the advisor when it comes to Freud. There's so much that you've built on here. And what I think is going to be interesting to people, and we sort of touched on it earlier, and that is in the book that you aptly titled Your Life, Your Way. That's something we use a lot with our clients here at Wellness Together. And we used it to make an entire curriculum online. And actually, you can go to it and experience it for free. Wellness Education Labs. You can go in and experience an even more streamlined version. But going back to your book, Your Life, Your Way, first of all, it makes it incredibly interesting to adolescents, because what's more important as an adolescent than me and my life? So I think you did a great job with the title. And it sort of it's illustrated too, brilliantly illustrated and streamlined. But in the very beginning of the book, it sort of goes into this concept of sort of like this black and white, almost did you call it Zombieland? Or it was
Zombieland.
Yeah, tell us about Zombieland.
Well, maybe the listeners can feel Zombieland. Zombieland is the concept of when you just go through the day totally immersed in what you have to do next, your to-do lists, your emails, your jobs, your shopping, your laundry, and you wake up and open your eyes and your brain goes, bam, do all these things, get through today. Mm-hmm. Why are you so far behind? And you just go through this like day life on autopilot.
So Zombieland can be sort of connected with autopilot.
It can be connected with autopilot, or it can be just like what I say to people is giving your life over to your advisor.
Okay.
Because like your advisor's job is to plan and problem solve and make those to-do lists and, think about all of the jobs that you have to do. That's the job of our cognitive ability. And, the only time you're not going to have a to-do list is when you're dead, right? Mm-hmm. That's the only time your to-do list is done.
But there's safety in that Zombieland, right?
Yeah.
Why? Isn't that why we do it? We just say, okay. I feel like it's like one of my favorite authors, Donald Miller, in one of his first books, talks about how people and why people. And it turns you into a how person, and you can only ask, how do I make money? How do I get a job? How do I get done this list of chores? But you don't ever go into the more terrifying and much deeper end, which is the why would I do any of this?
Yeah, exactly. So, and if you think about the way our minds are trained and the purpose of having this cognitive ability that we call your advisor is back in evolutionary times, it was to like work out where's the next food coming from, where's the danger, have I got enough to survive, are my family safe, do I have shelter, where are the lions? And that's the way that our cognitive ability works.
So that's the reason for Zombieland?
Well, we've translated that into modern life, which is, have I got my homework done, or have I got my school reports done, or have I written my assessments for my clients, and what's my to-do list, and what do I have to do next, and are my children okay, and have I got food in the fridge? And they're all important things, but you don't want to just live your life with your advisor, because you lose that why. You lose that experience. And in our case, you lose the ability to just notice, to just sit with someone you love on the sofa and be there for a minute or two.
So there's more to being human and to the human experience than what we in our modern age tend to lean towards, which is being effective and efficient.
I think so. And the research shows us so. And our connection with other people shows that too.
What does the research show us?
Well, the research shows that people are healthier and happier if they are able to experience their range of emotions and be present in the world. If they're able to connect with things that are in their heart that they value and care about. If they're able to grow through trying new experiences. Right? That's all psychological flexibility. In some ways, I think with that piece of Zombieland, it's like DNAV has 4 abilities: discover, notice, give yourself advice, and value things and care about things. And I think of them as 4 abilities that we need to learn how to use all of them in a balanced way.
So the key is balance. Because right away, I want to shame myself for just going right into my to-do list and getting everything, taken care of and making sure I run this company, which all seems like a good idea.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. And you could have tons of vitality in doing that, but only you can answer that question. Does it feel vital? Does it feel like it's sapping your life? See, that's the trick here, is the very same activity for you could be filled with vitality. For me, it might be, I feel like I'm just, driven and not enjoying life. Or it could be the reverse. So we can only decide for ourselves. No one can decide for us.
What's the opposite of Zombieland, and how does DNAV get us there?
Well, the opposite of Zombieland we call Vitality Land. And so it's just a silly name that we made up. But Vitality Land is to be able to think about and be able to go through your day and thinking about what's the thing that I really want to do right now? What's the thing that I care about right now? Am I able to pause and say hello to someone in the corridor? Can I text a friend and share a joke? Or am I just driven by this to-do list? I have time for nothing. Often I tell a little story to my clients. I'll tell a little story. I've got 2 sons, and my youngest boy, Darcy, when he was just a little baby, he liked to read the same story every day. It was called Where's My Teddy? Right? I could read it to you right now without the book. I can recite it, right? Where's My Teddy? Now, and he was such a cute little fellow. He loved this story. And for about a year, I read the same story every night. And he would sit on my knee and I would read the story to him. Now, more often than I'd like to think, I was reading the story and my advisor was driving me, what I've got to do tonight after when they're asleep, all the jobs I have to do, the study I have to do. And I would be reading, but my mind would be somewhere else.
Yes.
But then other times I would be able to read the story and we'd just enjoy the way he would giggle and notice how his hair smells and feel his body sitting next to me and just be in the story with him. Now, which one takes longer? Reading the story with my advisor in the background or reading the story and being in the experience?
I don't know. It seems like they would take a similar amount of time, but one would be incredibly life-giving and the other one would just be a waste?
Yeah, they probably take the same amount of time. So why not stop and say hello to someone in the corridor and listen to them and talk to them and then go and do your next thing? But instead we stop and look at someone in the corridor and talk to them, but our advisor's going, you still have to go, your report's done, you haven't done this, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do this. And
But what's the reward? Do we get a little bit of dopamine when we check off something on the list? I mean, why are we doing that?
I do.
Yeah.
I love putting that tick in the box.
Yeah. So
I think there's multiple rewards. You could say you get dopamine. You could also say that you feel like you're in control. That you feel like your life is purposeful. But the question to ask ourselves is it? And only we can answer that question, you know.
or spend all of our time and effort trying to avoid it.
Yeah. And the other part of it is your advisor is never going to run out of work for you to do. Remember, you tick off all your to-do list, you're probably going to be dead by then because, we keep having things we have to do.
I think you mentioned the fact that we're all going to die. You said it in a nicer way, but one of the things that makes me feel so at home with DNAV is having lost a parent really early in life. I sort of learned that this is all temporary and I wasn't able to ignore it. And so what DNAV does for me anyway, it makes perfect sense. Because of course I would want to find out who I am and what are my values. And of course I would want to find out how I can do the most good or act in line with what I think is going to be helpful, because I'm not always going to be here. But what do you tell a person who, I talk to so many people who do an incredible job. I'm actually jealous often with how much some people act like life doesn't come to an end and they're totally good with staying with what they can control or what they think they can control.
Well, your question was, what do I say to a person?
How do I say to someone without saying, hey, you're going to die, and being morbid and sad and offensive, and just say, hey, what's another nice way of saying that? Because often it's a selfish thing. I feel lonely because I'm like, hey, my perspective is one that is, I don't want to get preachy or feel like I'm better, but I feel like I'm being honest about the fact that we don't have forever. So why would you, I got a whole soapbox I would.
Well, I think there's two things. I think there's two things. The first thing is what you say to yourself, not what you say to a person, but what do you say to yourself? So when you said, I can get jealous when I look at how much they're achieving and how hard and all of these things, and I can think, oh, I should do that too, right? So the first thing is what you say to yourself.
And comparing, it sounds like, as part of that, or can be.
Yeah. And you can even say to yourself, I notice that I feel this sense of jealousy. You can have that little conversation with yourself. And can I have that and then still step in and do my life my way? Can I do both? Can I be a bit jealous of you and what you've got? But can I also just have that feeling and go, yeah, and I can still choose what I want to do. I don't have to have my life guided by what you do. So I think the first thing is what you say to yourself. And then the second part, you said, what do you say to a person? Well, I'm going to say I wouldn't say anything unless they asked me the question.
Well, that's going to be a problem for me because that's the way I feel in control, is to be really, really helpful when people didn't ask for it.
Well, but if you think about it in reverse, that person is influencing you by being driven, and you feel this sense of a bit of jealousy that they're driven and working really hard and achieving maybe some things that you want, but you're also influencing them. So perhaps the answer is by speaking about what you care about and by speaking about how you've discovered that doing things that really enrich you and warm your heart is not always the same as achieving. Or sometimes it makes achieving even better, which I think it does.
I think you're right. I think it's back to that balance because I think a lot of us will look at someone who's achieved a lot and someone like, I don't know, I don't want to get political, but someone like Elon Musk, who's, the wealthiest person in the world. But I don't think a lot of us look at him and say, oh, now that he's $200 billion richer overnight, he's now a happier person. I feel like a lot of us who aren't billionaires think, okay, if we were, we would move to an island and only hang out with the people we love. But it seems to be more like, and if this is a study, the billionaires that we see and hear from, it seems like the only thing they think about is another $1 billion.
And exactly. And if you think about it, that's exactly what we're talking about with your advisor, right?
Yeah.
It's just a bigger scale, but they've still got a to-do list. They've still got their advisor saying, oh, you need to achieve this, and now you can do this, right?
Yeah, like what's the point? Like if you're already the richest person that ever lived and your life didn't really change at all, why do those people keep working?
Because just like us, they have an advisor saying, what about this? What about that? What about if you could do this? What about if you could go to Mars? And before you know it, they're driven by the same like zombie land goals.
So they don't even have to be, because I think so many of us want to be rich so that we don't have to live in zombie land and we can go do cool things. But it doesn't sound like for the most part that's what people would do.
Well, if they're psychologically flexible, and that's what we're aiming for, then we can't make decisions about what they could do, right? But if you're psychologically flexible, you ought to be able to have a balanced life, not one that's driven by laziness, sitting on the sofa, or one that's driven by some, like task-focused goals. And instead think about what's really important to not just you, but we. And so there's a really important thing that I do in all of my writing. When we talk about values, we always talk about me and we. It's not just what I value, it's what we value. We're a group species. There's no point in me having everything if you've got nothing. We're not richer for that.
I feel like that needs to be the entire podcast. Everything you just said. It's true. I think we know it's true, but nobody's saying it except for saintly psychologists from Australia.
Well, there's a few ACT psychologists that say it, but I think it's really important. We can go wrong in ACT when we just talk about what I value. Like you can go wrong with a client. You can say, what do you value, Marlon? What's really meaningful to you? And you can get really selfish and self-focused in that too. It has to be what you value, Marlon, but also what the people you love value. And then you come back to that, being driven and wanting to achieve in life. Well, is this just what you value, or is it what you and the people you love and care about value? What about if you're at work for 100 hours a week and you never see your kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that happens a lot. And that's certainly something that, you talk about balance. It would be easy to do that because I know how to do my job, but I'm not always ready for, most of the time, not ready for what my 3-year-old's going to do next. Even though most of the time I love it. Some of the times, though, I feel completely out of control.
Yeah, and a 3-year-old is a great example for learning about the way you use your advisor, because you can be playing Lego with a 3-year-old while your mind is going, do this, and you need to do that, and you need to finish this so you can do that. It's really interesting.
Louise, I could talk to you for the next 3 hours, but I really appreciate you. I think I didn't expect this. I should have, but I didn't. I wanted you to come on and explain ACT and DNAV, but it's the stories about your life and how you're living it that you sort of became the message with what you're doing in Nepal, with what you're doing in your private practice, and how you're putting your values front and center and sort of living towards them versus ignoring and avoiding other things. It's not that you're doing that. It's that you are doing things that are helpful and in line with who you are, who you know yourself to be, and you're helping so many other people. Just your books, the workbooks, the sort of the thriving adolescent, I think is another great example. If you do have kids, or you have kids, you're like headed for the teen years, and you want to be able to help them. That's something that has helped me. And also the one we talked about earlier. I feel like Your Way, Your Life is an even more interesting and engaging version of some of the books that you've written in the past. And for adults, the book What Makes You Stronger, that's the most recent one that I read, that you were a contributor. I think you authored that with a few other people, but it has vignettes all throughout and sort of does what you did today. And it makes the vignette, or the person, the message of ACT and of DNAV. And it was so helpful. So I encourage anyone to go through the same sort of transformation and information gathering process about ACT. If you're tired of CBT, or you feel like it's not connected enough to who you are and why you do what you do, and those important why questions, it doesn't go deep enough for you, I think ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, Louise Hayes, her books, and DNAV are a great place, a great direction to head. So Louise, we thank you so much for being here today.
Can I say one more little thing? I just want people to know that I'm not special. I left school at 14. I grew up in a poor family. I don't even have a high school education. I got lucky and I discovered what I cared about. And that's the secret.
Well, I think everyone listening is thinking that you are special, and everything you just mentioned probably led you to this place. So thank you for allowing the things in your life, the things that maybe you didn't feel like made you special, to actually create a really special life that we can look at and be inspired by.
Thank you, Marlon. It's been so great to talk to you.
You too. Thanks for joining us today. We hope it helped. Stay connected with us at thishelpspodcast.com.